Hey everybody, it's Chris Nichols here from the camera store. Welcome back. And yes, you guessed it, I'm looking at the Sony A7R II today. Now, by far the most eagerly anticipated A7 camera that we've ever reviewed. And here at TCS TV, we've reviewed them all. And that's because this is really an amalgamation of Sony's technology. Just the best of all the A7 cameras stuck into one. People have very big expectations for this camera. They're thinking that maybe this is the camera that can finally make people say, you know what? Mirrorless is good enough for professional work. This is a camera that we'd prefer to have, and this is a great way to go into the future. We got some strong light, some direct sunlight here, and Jordan was even commenting that he's not sure if the shot's gonna work or not, because Jordan tonight is also shooting on a Sony A7R II. He's gonna talk quite a bit about the video later on, and there is a lot to talk about. This camera is being lauded not just for its stills capability, but for its video capability as well. And I should mention something else. The first part of the video, Jordan's gonna be shooting in the 4K mode, full frame sensor. Now, it's not a full sensor readout. That's something we got to keep in mind, not like the Sony A7S. Also, he's shooting S-Log, but he's shooting at ISO 800 because that's the new native ISO. So we're not really sure what we're going to get. We're going to find out. For the second part of the video, you guys get to see him shooting in the Super 35mm mode. It's going to be a crop, but you're going to get full sensor readout, and the quality may be different. So keep an eye out for those two transitions, see how it goes. Now, we do have a lot to talk about, and I do want to get right into it, but before we do, I should mention, never before have we had a camera like this where everybody's just losing their shit over it. I mean, yes, on paper, this camera promises a lot and looks amazing, and you know, I would love to see mirrorless cameras come into the forefront and really be able to compete with SLRs and be chosen by professionals on purpose, you know, for full-on applications. But so far that hasn't been done. And you know, Sony A7's been trying, the A7R's been trying, the A7 II. Can this finally do it? All right, now body design right off the bat basically is the same as the A7 II. Very similar feel. Now, of course, I love the new shutter design position. I think that's way better than the original A7 cameras. But unfortunately, we still have the same plastic dials. And I really didn't like these. I actually prefer the big chunky metal dials. I find these hard to turn in a quick shooting situation. We've got a locking knob now on the top of the dial. So, okay, a nice change, I guess. I never noticed that being a problem before, though. The grip, now Jordan and I keep disagreeing about this. It is a fantastically molded grip, but he really likes it beyond that, and I feel that it's still a little bit too small and short. You know, a lot of people with bigger hands are gonna have a hard time holding this, and of course, I don't. I'm surprised that Jordan loves the grip so much, but he has used these cameras a lot now. You can put the battery grip on, and that will add some more weight. You might want that if you put on bigger lenses. I still find the feel of the A7R II here body to be very good. The weight is exactly where I'd want it. Heavy enough to be substantial and stable, but not too heavy that it's now an SLR and bulky and all the rest. So it's a nice compromise there. Of course, weather sealed body, metal design, great custom buttons, rotating screen. I mean, it's all very similar. And I'm actually pretty impressed by how easy I can see this screen in the sunlight, but of course any good mirrorless camera is going to have an amazing EVF. I mean, we're relying on it. I prefer them now, honestly, to optical viewfinders when they're good, and the A7R II doesn't disappoint. I mean, this is probably the best mirrorless viewfinder we've seen so far. 0.78 magnification is very large now for mirrorless EVF, but more importantly than that, they've given us a dual spherical lens and Zeiss T-Star coatings, and it does make this a beautiful EVF to use. Sony's always done a good job. I didn't have a problem with the earlier EVFs, and this makes it even better. So Jordan says I look very powerful right now. That's one of 3 compliments that I get per year. There's an actual limit on it. But speaking of powerful, the Sony A7R II's autofocusing system is vastly improved. And this was really one of my complaints on the earlier A7 cameras. They just didn't focus very quick. They were accurate, of course, like any mirrorless, but they were slow. This camera is unique because it's using phase detection autofocus. 399 points spread across a large majority of the screen means this camera really has no dead zones. It can focus almost to the edge. I mean, it's a really nice move. The autofocus on this, folks, is truly impressive. Point to point is very quick. We're getting great continuous focusing, and they've actually enhanced the package. You have many different options now, more than just wide, zone, and single point. You've got very flexible points. You have an expanded point, which is smart enough to use the existing around points, you know, something like what a Nikon would do with dynamic zone focusing. I mean, this stuff all enhances its continuous capabilities, its fast shooting capabilities. I'm still going to go ahead and say it is not GH4 level point to point, but it is much better than any other Sony A7 camera. Now, phase detection autofocus does give us another big benefit as well, and that's when we're using adapters. Now, Sony have, to their credit, been very good about saying, you know what, we recognize third-party lenses and third-party adapters like Canon glass, Metabones, for example, are going to be very important to supporting our pre-existing lens lineup. And of course, it's also winning over a lot of users from Canon and Nikon and other companies as well that want to use their glass too. So they've been really smart about this so far, and with this A7R Mark II, it gets even better. The autofocus with adapters, the Metabones first with Canon glass, very impressive. I mean, it worked before on the other cameras, but as you guys have already seen with our other reviews, it was very slow. Took a long time to zero in and get its target. I'd say that this camera, when it's working well with the adapter, gives us almost on par to a more mid to low level Canon SLR or Nikon SLR. It does vary though. I mean, if you get the light levels a little bit lower, or if it doesn't quite have enough texture, it can really hunt and have a hard time. You're still gonna have the odd moment where it just has to hunt and hunt and hunt, and it's annoying, but vastly improved from what it was. And again, with firmware updates and new time going by, it could even get better. Now, it's not just Metabones adapters that get an improvement. Sony can also now use the LAE3 adapter, their more affordable adapter that works with alpha glass without having to have that ridiculous pellicle mirror system and get crazy good fast autofocus. So if you are an existing Sony lens user from the alpha system and now you're looking, you're ready to go for it, you didn't think the other cameras would focus properly, this one will, and you don't have to get the pellicle mirror system to do it. Alright, so unlike a recent Sony RX10 Mark II video we did where we shot the entire thing with a shotgun microphone, this water sound should hopefully not be too obtrusive, and it's contextually appropriate. You can see it behind us. So let's talk about the Sony A7R II's negative issues, because yeah, it's not all perfect. First off, W series battery. Now, I know this is what Sony's been using on all their cameras, and to their credit, they actually give you two in the box with an external charger. The only downside is this is 290 shots per battery. Even with two batteries, you're still not anywhere close to a Canon or Nikon. And if we want these cameras to now compete on the SLR market, that has to improve. We got lots of space, we need a bigger battery or more efficient internals. Now, we do have a few other issues as well. I mean, the single card slot was fine before, but we've got a really high resolution camera now. I'd like to see a second card slot. Remember, you need a 64 gig card in there just to do XAVC files. With a higher resolution, it'd be nice to have the extra space. The other thing I would like to see is a small RAW function. I mean, I know that RAW is all about getting the best quality possible, but if you don't need that high resolution and you're trying to streamline your workflow, it's nice to sometimes have a smaller res RAW. And I guess the big problem with it is it's easy to code into the camera, so why haven't they done it? The slots over here, headphone jack, microphone jack, a little bit high up close to the strap lug. We got a lot of space, that could be lower. And when we're talking about ergonomics for video also, the small micro HDMI port is not a great choice. We've got plenty of space, and it'd be nice to have a bigger port there, because if you're using monitors, you're gonna find that tiny port, it's always bending, flexing, falling out. It's just not a great choice. No, I do not have to pee. I'm in fact sitting in a very wobbly chair, very unstable. Good thing though I have the A7R II, because this has the same inbuilt stabilization as the 7 Mark II. Now this is really nice because with a lens that's image stabilized in the lens, I get 5 axes of stabilization. Again, they're saying 4.5 stops, but having that inbuilt stabilization means I also get stability if I'm using lenses that don't have built-in stabilization. It's great when you're putting on Leica lenses, any sort of prime lenses that don't have stabilization, legacy lenses. It's fantastic that they put it in here. I loved it on the 7 Mark II, and it works great here as well. And of course, when it comes to video, we're also going to get the benefits of that as well. A great move. I'm happy that it's still here. All right, so I haven't talked about image quality yet, and I'm not going to right now, frankly. I haven't even shot any photos in here in this beautiful park, and that's because, as you can tell from the tower up there behind me, we're still in the city of Calgary. And of course, we love our town, but even we get tired of shooting it. I know you guys get tired of watching photos from Calgary all the time, so we're gonna get out there into the wilderness again tomorrow. We're gonna pick up where we left off. We're gonna give the A7R II a proper field test. Not only that, but we're bringing out Kyle Marquardt. We know how much you love him, so we're going to have the Canon 5DSR, which is the highest resolution SLR 35mm style on the market right now. So we're going to shoot that. We're going to shoot the Sony. We're going to change places. We're going to have a good old duel. And in all that, we're going to hopefully see, what does the Sony A7R II really promise for image quality? Can it compete? Is it an SLR killer? So stay tuned. We'll see you guys right away tomorrow. All right, welcome back. Here we are in Canmore with Kyle Marquardt. Thanks for joining us.
You're welcome.
So we're gonna go ahead and do this shootout here. Now Kyle's gonna go and start with the A7R Mark II. I get the 5DSR, and I'm really excited about it. And we're gonna shoot our little competition here. But in all seriousness, this will be a good test to see, you know, what are the differences, if any? You know, is one tool better than the other?
This has some nice new tech, really nice dynamic range. I'm really looking forward to testing that out. I'm used to lower megapixel cameras, 20 megapixels or so. So this is quite a new experience for me.
Absolutely. So we're going to get out shooting. It's a super hot day, but hopefully we'll have a good time and give these cameras a good test.
Yeah, and Chris is here to show us that he's actually a good photographer.
I made him do that. All right, now don't forget to pay attention to the last half of the video here, because this is where Jordan's shooting the A7R Mark II in the super 35mm crop mode. This gives full sensor readout, no line bending or skipping or anything like that, so the quality should be different. Pay attention, we're gonna get shooting. I just got my leg wet, and the reason I'm lying down here awkwardly on the ground, as you can see, is not because I enjoy this, but because I have to get my eye through the optical viewfinder on the 5DSR here. And it's great when you can do it. I mean, I get a nice view, but the back screen on this thing, with a light like this, I just can't see enough to really make sure I'm in focus properly and, you know, where everything's falling.
Oh my God! The screen pops out at the back. So nice. So nice.
Anyways, back to getting soaking wet and shooting through the viewfinder here.
So it's really bright out here. I can hardly see the screen in the back, but when I look through the viewfinder, I see a nice digital viewfinder that's fairly high resolution. This is the first time I've used one of these, and I've looked through the viewfinder and I thought, this is what I'm getting. I can actually see. It doesn't feel like I'm entirely looking through a screen.
So I'm not really digging this whole sharing gear thing and shooting, because, I mean, I want to shoot this here. I need a tripod. Now, of course, I'm no professional photographer, but I had the wherewithal to bring a tripod with me. And the pro photographer down the stream a ways is shooting with my tripod. Kyle, I want my tripod. So despite the diminutive angle, I'm going to be the bigger man today and give Kyle the tripod. I've found my own tripod. Check that out. Huh? I'm gonna make it work. Ah.
So we're going to test the continuous autofocus on the A7R II, the Sony, with the Metabones adapter, and the Canon 70-200. The 70-200 is my jam. I love this lens. It's fantastic. I shoot a lot of action with this lens. It's really cool. So I have really low expectations. I don't really expect the Canon to be working well with the Sony here. So let's see what happens when we have Mitch running towards us, and basically our focus is going to be changing quite rapidly. It's like the Men's Health magazine cover here. Oh yeah. Oh, that's a nice smile. You know, that's not bad.
Yeah, you don't think so? Yeah, it's not bad.
It's not as bad as I thought it would be.
But it's still not up to a Canon SLR spec.
It's not quite.
Yeah, you'd be getting hit rate on that.
It's not quite.
I mean, let's keep in mind too, okay, the Metabones isn't as good as a full Canon SLR with native glass.
Yeah.
But it's so much better than it used to be.
Yeah.
Like, you'd have zero chance of
I
doing
would say,
this
like,
before.
if I was a landscape photographer just doing landscapes, or if I was just, if I'm shooting Canon right now, and I'm commercial, everything's staged, everything's quiet and not moving really quickly.
Yeah.
This is fantastic. There's no downside for that.
I could see, in the studio, the focusing speed, perfectly acceptable.
Yeah, it's really good. But when it comes to like perfect action where you want that 100% performance from your autofocus speed and accuracy, we're still a little bit off with the Metabones adapter.
I think that's fair, I agree.
Yeah, just a bit.
Okay, so we're gonna do a side-by-side test. Kyle has the Zeiss 24-70. I know not a sports and action lens, but it'll work. And I'm using the Canon 24-70, both f4, so we should have a pretty fair contest. Servo mode, single point. And just a side note, both cameras shoot 5 frames per second, which is pretty respectable considering, the file size we're getting here, but we're not really gonna be testing that. Let's see how many shots we get and if they're really in focus.
Yeah. It's all right.
I'm finding on mine, actually, the Canon did a really good job, and that makes sense. I mean, I know it's a 5 DSR, it's not really made for action and sports, but it has the same focusing system as a 5D Mark III, which is great.
Yeah.
Yeah, these all hit really nicely.
It seems to be doing a better job than it did when it had the Canon lens on it.
Now, let's ask you this question. Let's say you go shoot a sports event or something like that, or an event, and you had to pick your Canon SLR or this, what would you feel more comfortable
It would be the
with?
Canon.
Yeah?
Unfortunately.
Yeah, I'd agree with that too. Everybody online is saying like, oh, the new A7R II, it focuses as good as a Canon SLR, and I'm gonna say it's much better, but it's still not.
I mean, it would be easier. It'd be easier if I could make the choice and switch over to the Sony, still use my Canon glass. It would be easier. I'd be saving money.
Sure.
I would have a higher dynamic range, higher megapixel. I want to make that decision.
Yeah.
I want to be able to make that decision. I want to make up reasons why that would work. But I can't.
All right, so we're done the shooting portion of our little test here. We both had a chance to use both cameras. I don't know, what kind of impression do you have so far on both cameras?
I really like this camera. I like it. It's enjoyable. I usually don't like new cameras, things that are totally different. The menus are annoying and terrible.
Sony menus.
It's really bad menus. I'm not too happy with the autofocus performance. When using Canon glass, maybe that's unfair because this puts this camera at a disadvantage. But it's not like we're putting Sony lenses
on this camera. Yeah, let's put Sony on the Canon.
But if you're starting out with nothing, and you're starting out with all the Sony lenses, this is going to be great. This is actually going to blow the Canon out of the water.
All right, Kyle, so we're back now. We've had a chance to process the files, look at them, and just talk about the image quality. What is your sort of impression that you've gotten using both cameras?
I was blown away by the dynamic range of the Sony. The Sony had, it was just amazing looking at the histogram. Everything was scrunched into the middle and I had to stretch everything out. Whereas with Canon, I was touching the edges already. I'm constantly blowing my highlights.
Yeah, I noticed that.
Blowing out my highlights, blowing out my shadows.
I noticed that too. I noticed it when shooting in the canyon section, the light was quite a bit harder. We had a lot of shadows. And even still, although the histogram was stretched out more, the Sony had no problem handling it. I'm glad I didn't shoot the Canon in that situation. But also very impressively, highlights. Pulling down highlights in the Sony A7R Mark II, I noticed really good. It had more room than I thought it would. More room than the Canon for sure. And dynamic range, we're spoiled nowadays. We get cameras that do a really good job. But the Sony does push it just a little bit further.
Yeah.
Okay, so of course, what everybody really wants to know is these are high resolution cameras. The Sony is breaking boundaries now for its megapixel count in its series. What did you find with resolution?
This is a great example here.
Yeah.
You got the meandering river, yeah, that's nice. But you zoom in and you click.
Tiny little segments,
Yeah. Oh, there's a fisherman there.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's amazing.
Now, it's interesting, of course, the 5 DSR, big megapixels. We already did our video on that. We found it did a really good job on a tripod. That's where you get the maximum sharpness out of it. With my impressions on the Sony, of course, you still need a tripod if you're going to get the best resolution out of it. Yeah. But I did find hand holding the Sony was really easy. And the Sony shutter, I mean, it used to be really rough. The A7 II improved it, and this one I find is maybe even a little bit better. It's very stable. I had no problems hand holding it.
So on the Canon, I was shooting it handheld, and that's because I like to shoot a lot of stuff handheld. There's a lot of action that I tend to shoot. The tripod, it just gets in the way. But I thought maybe I could just bump up the shutter speed. Now normally on the Canon, I'll be shooting 1/160th of a second or so to be able to get some nice macro shots. And on a stabilized lens, that works just fine. And on this stabilized lens with the 5DSR, I had to shoot around 1/1000th of a second.
Wow. So of course we did our test during the best possible time of day, high noon. Yeah, because I'm kidding. Obviously it was terrible. But high ISO, Jordan and I have done some tests around the store. Did you find anything with high ISO? Because we found the Sony A7R Mark II is pretty good at high ISO performance. It's very comparable to the Sony A7S, which was before now sort of the low light killer, king of everything. I'd put it very close on par with some of the Nikon cameras, maybe just a little bit more noise than the Nikon cameras when it comes to processing. You know, for high ISO, it's not the best camera on the market right now. Something like the Nikon D810s, D750s are still very, very good. I would say slightly better when it comes down to the raw, but this new sensor's fantastic.
Yeah, I mean, the reason we're not talking about Nikon is because there's almost no reason to, because if you're shooting Nikon, stay with Nikon.
They're great
cameras. Why are you watching?
Yeah. Well, and you know, we should say too, here's the other thing. I mean, we're making these comparisons against Canon, and that's really for two reasons. I mean, first off, Canon has put out the big front runner for megapixels, so of course they're going to be a target. But I think even more importantly, you have to remember that Canon users have been looking for high megapixels for a long time, and Sony, and really up to this point, Metabones as a company, have been instrumental in making Canon lenses work on Sony bodies. So Canon users are the ones naturally looking at, oh, hey, maybe the Sony is an alternative for me.
It's like a conspiracy to shift Canon users over to Sony.
It could be.
It's probably going to work.
We have a lot of new adapters coming out on the market, but so far Nikon lenses just aren't supported well, not to mention the other brands. So yeah, we really do have to draw comparisons specifically right now between Sony and Canon, and maybe that'll change in the future. I'm sure Sony would love a piece of Nikon's market share too. All right, so final thoughts when it comes to stills. What did you think about the Sony?
The autofocus performance with the Canon lenses isn't the ultimate for me right now.
No.
I don't have a huge collection of Sony lenses right now. If I had a bunch of Sonys, if I was starting off from scratch, then yeah, I probably would go for the Sonys by all means. Those few times where I want to capture action, where I have a moving subject, I'm not going to trust the Sony as much.
You know, here's the thing. I think the Sony A7R Mark II is a fantastic camera. I was quite skeptical when we first looked at it because it looked too good to be true. I think it does focus way better than any of its predecessors. The image quality is stunning, whether you handhold it or use a tripod. Dynamic range is great. High ISO performance is great. I like the way the camera handles. It's stable. So the EVF is brilliant. So I guess for me, I think if you're starting out or if you're an enthusiast, this camera's going to do great.
I totally agree.
The only thing I think that's going to keep professionals from saying, okay, forget my SLRs, let's go Sony, is because working professionals, as you know, and as I find from the store when they're talking about it, if there's any sort of hiccups or slowing down or unpredictability, when you're working on a job, those things are just killers. You don't want them.
You need complete reliability. Like out on a shoot, when your clients are there and the art director is there, it's like performance. And if you're like sweating, like, oh my god, I just had a model just run past and I'm looking at the camera and I didn't get that shot. Shoot, what am I gonna do?
Exactly, and I think that's the reason why people are still going to go tried and true. You know, Sony has to show, and maybe they will as firmware updates and stuff come out, if they can make their cameras 100% reliable with all the adapters, with the lenses, I think we could certainly see people moving over and making this, a professional camera for professional markets.
This moving over thing has happened before, though. I remember people switching from Nikon to Canon, because Canon at the time was better, and then now they're switching from Canon to Nikon, and now Canon to Sony or whatever. Jumping ships is a little bit dangerous.
Yeah, it is tough. I think, Metabones, if it can work a little bit better, because we do have issues once in a while, if it can work better, or if Sony starts coming out with some better glass and more glass, they certainly still need that. I think the Sony A7R Mark II is going to be a big success in the future.
Yeah, it's going to be successful.
Absolutely. And if you are looking for a compact camera, you're not married to a brand, and you want to get fantastic features, this is a great application.
Yeah, go for the Sony. If you don't have any equipment at all, go for it.
Fantastic. All right, thanks, Kyle, so much for doing this with us, and I'm glad that you got a chance to try it out. And remember, Twitter, Instagram, subscribe, and let's not forget about Jordan. I know you guys are like, wait, the video can't be done because we haven't talked about video features, and that's a whole other thing. And the A7R Mark II also delivers some fantastic stuff. So let's turn it over to Jordan and find out about those capabilities.
Okay guys, this timeline is just getting ridiculous. So we're gonna break things up a little bit. This is part 1 you just saw with all the stills functionality. I'm gonna be back with part 2. I wanna talk about all the video features of the camera. And also, I've shot a lot of stills with it in the last month. So I'm gonna have a little back and forth with Chris, just kind of discuss my experiences shooting stills with it as well. Maybe we'll actually agree on something this time. So you can look forward to that in part 2. Gonna be out next week. In the meantime, guys, thanks for watching and we'll see you soon.